We stayed upstairs in my room. I remember a few times turning over to him, and he was a really handsome guy. I looked over at him and I saw this hideous face of a woman.
My mother just whipped around with the duster in her hand. She said, "You want a bet?" And the look on her face was pure Oma, and I just sat there and I'm like I didn't know what to say. And she started shaking the duster, and Dad turned to me and he said, "What do I do?"
This little house in London, it was very much a tiny little cottage home. Many of us who walked in and people who would come in just had a bit of an uncomfortable feeling. If you spent any time in there, you would kind of feel like, is there someone watching? You know, although it had a very small, cozy feeling, it was old, it was drafty. It really didn't lend itself to being a place that you wanted to stay around in too long. And especially upstairs. When you went upstairs, it was just a little attic space, which had been converted into 2 small little bedrooms. I would wake up at 3:00 every morning. I'd be fast asleep, and all of a sudden I'd wake up feeling that there was something there, either right above me or right around me, and I would literally look, is there anything here? And I'd look to the clock, 3:00. And then other things just started happening, like really more physically and more visibly after that. That was still very much a sensation, but you could tell there was something there.
Parents, grandparents, the old couple down the street. The elderly are often a source of experience and wisdom. But as ghost literature reveals, in the supernatural world, they can also be terrifying and dangerous. Hi, I'm Lawrence Chow. Today in Ghostly Encounters, we meet Helen and Lisanne. They both have chilling tales to tell about the ghost of the aged. Helen Roos believes she senses a presence, she tells us, that makes life in her cozy cottage anything but comforting.
In the kitchen, cupboards started to move. You know, you walk in and you see something, bang, bang. Sort of like someone was really there holding it and closing it right in front of you. Chairs were moving. The dining room chairs would now be one in the sunroom, one in the living room, one in the kitchen, and you're like, what the hell is going on in this house? When I started university, I worked while I went through school, so did school full-time because I wanted to get out. So I ended up going to Toronto for a couple of years. But coming back, I thought, 23 years old, here with my boyfriend, nothing's gonna happen. But it did, it just kept getting worse. One night, between my boyfriend and I sitting, we were watching TV, there was such a distinct waft of perfume. My mother didn't wear perfume. I did, but it was certainly not my perfume. That all of a sudden I thought, who's entered the house? A few seconds later, I was pushed on my side, that I literally got pushed. And my boyfriend was on the other chair. I'm on the couch watching TV, and I thought, whoa, someone's right here beside me. You know, it wasn't just a matter of you know, a wisp of a curtain moving that you think, oh, gee, someone's here. No, it got very, very physical. And then I remember I was doing some research for a pretty big paper, and I literally had about 20 books. I think they were huge. I'm a history major, so these things are hefty, and I had them all organized on our big coffee table. And then all of a sudden, boom, a huge mass of books that just scattered everywhere. And it was something so definitive that something with great force must have just cast the whole lot of them right onto the floor. I got to the point, though, even, as she pushed me, that I sort of said, enough.
Enough. You're not
just to try to say, you're not scaring me anymore, although she was. But I thought if I can just verbalize it and just say, just enough. But it didn't matter. And we looked at each other, we held our hands and just went, oh my God. This was something out of a horror movie. It's getting worse, it's getting big, it's getting powerful now. When I was in the kitchen, there was an incident, and I remember stirring. I don't know what I was doing. I was stirring something. There was a knock, a definitive knock. And it was, I think, springtime, so we thought probably someone canvassing for Girl Guide cookies, who knows. And he said, oh, I'll go get it. I was like, good, I'm cooking. And then there was a woman who just sort of walked right past him to get the door. When I was in the kitchen, there was an incident, and I remember stirring. I don't know what I was doing. I was stirring something. There was a knock, a definitive knock. And it was, I think, springtime, so we thought probably someone canvassing for Girl Guide cookies, who knows. And he said, oh, I'll go get it. I was like, good, I'm cooking. And then there was a woman who just sort of walked right past him to get the door. So she walked right by him, right in front of him, and it was just this swoop of and of a woman in a dress, like a 50s floral dress, and an older woman. It wasn't a young woman, it wasn't my mother's middle age at that time, it was an old woman. It was someone, and it was someone in the house. You just couldn't deny it.
Helen believes she has finally seen the ghost that's been tormenting her. Now she wonders what new terrors the future holds.
When I moved back from Toronto, my boyfriend stayed with me, with my mother. I mean, we were 23, 24 years old. It was all right. We stayed upstairs in my room, and none of us had a very good feeling being up there. I remember a few times turning over to him, and he was a really handsome guy. I looked over at him and I saw this hideous face of a woman. Just a hideous, drawn, skeletal face. She said, you're not supposed to be here. Those were her phrases. You're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to go. It was just horrible. And so it was at that time that we said, okay, hold on. Let's see if we can figure out who this is. We went next door, and we're still very good friends with the older lady who's now 98, 99. And we walked over, and I said, who lived in this house? Oh, yeah, that was Aunt so-and-so. Yeah, she passed away. Oh, passed away in the early 60s, as she does her stories. And I said, would you happen to have a picture? Oh, yeah. So she opened up the photo album, and she's showing Tom, Dick, Harry, and oh, and here she is. And there was her face. And the face of a very not attractive, gaunt, skeletal-looking old lady. And I just, that's her. And I had to shut it right away because that was her. That was her. Then it ended up that the woman was elderly. She was living in that house with her son and her daughter-in-law. And it had always been the deal that she was to remain in that house forever. And that was the guarantee that her son had made her. But when he died, the daughter-in-law shipped her off to a senior's home. And when she died, she came back to the house because that was her home. That was where she was to be. Oh, I think she wanted revenge. And I think she wanted to put me out, inconvenience me as supposedly I had done to her. It's funny, though, because I visit my mom very, very regularly. And still, when I drive down Old Wonderland Road and I see the house and I look at it and I'm unsettled. I don't like looking at it.
Helen tells us the ghost of an old woman drove her out of a house she considers her own. But Lisa Ann Bond speaks of the ghost of an elderly woman with whom she has a far more personal connection.
Growing up, I had a very good childhood where my parents are concerned. Where my grandparents are concerned, I did not. I got along very well with my grandfather. I did not get along very well with my grandmother, and that formed me into partially the person that I am today. In the summertime, when I was off of school, my parents would send me to my grandparents' house for a week out of the summer, and I hated going there. In their backyard, they had 3 hills. I was riding my bicycle down the hill, and I didn't step on the brakes fast enough, and I fell over to one side, and I hit my head on the ground. And I had all these scratches on the side of my face. My grandmother came out of the house and yelled at me to come up to the house.
Oh, be careful, Grandma, be careful. No, don't, please.
And she rubbed salt water into the cuts on my face and told me that that's what I get. And she just pretty much slammed it right into my eyes, and she kept it there while I'm screaming and telling her that it stings. I would see other people's grandmothers, and I would find it strange that their grandmother didn't act like mine, and that's when I realized that I had the strange grandmother. I wanted everybody else's grandmother. I wanted the grandmother that would bake cookies with me or teach me how to knit. My mother did that. My grandmother didn't teach me anything at all. When she ended up having a couple strokes, we moved her out of the house and put her into a nursing home. At about 2 o'clock in the morning, the phone rang, and Mom came running into my room. And there was a lot of, okay, yes, okay. And I turned the light on and I looked at her, and I said to Mom, is she gone? And Mom said, she's gone. And we had this big sigh of relief, like finally. That was the only thing that I could think of saying that would get this weight off of my shoulders, is you will not hurt me anymore. It was time for her to go. It's just unfortunately she didn't completely go. I would see other people's grandmothers, and I would find it strange that their grandmother didn't act like mine, and that's when I realized that I had the strange grandmother. After she died, she has made her presence known in my house. Oma is able to use glamour magic, as us pagans call it, and she will morph her face onto my mother's. My mother will start talking like my Oma and start using phrases that my Oma used to use that was in her vocabulary, like, do you want to bet? And oh boy, which are things my mother would not normally say. We had made plans to go somewhere. I believe we were going to Hamilton. And I said to Mom, okay, are we ready to leave? And Mom was dusting the china cabinet with her back to us. And Mom said, where are we going? And Dad said, well, we had plans to go to Hamilton today. And she said, no, you didn't. This is the first time I've heard something about it. And Dad said, no, we've said this to you before. And jokingly, sometimes we will say to my mom, Mom, you're losing it, you know. And she just whipped around with the duster in her hand. She said, you want to bet? And the look on her face was pure Oma. And I just sat there, and I'm like I didn't know what to say. She started to take on Oma's face, where her jowls were starting to hang, like Oma's did. Her hair would slowly start to curl, and she would become much paler. You want to bet? You know, I've known my mother all my life. I know how my mother talks, and when Oma takes over Mom, the voice will change to my Oma's voice. And she started shaking the duster. One of Oma's moves was she would shake her fist at you. She started shaking the duster, and Dad turned to me and he said, what do I do? And I said, I said, Oma, just go. And she almost had like this little smile on her face, like it was Oma saying, ha, look what I can do. And then Oma left. And Mom said, oh, I'm sorry, I guess I forgot to write it down, or I don't remember. We can go after lunch. And then we told her afterwards what had happened, and she almost started to cry. She said, I'm sorry, I don't know what came over me. I don't know what happened. And I said, oh, I can tell you exactly what came over you. It was Oma. I think what it is she's still trying to assert her position, still trying to threaten and to hurt me and to make me feel like I'm nothing. And it got so strong to the point where I tried to have her smudged out of the house. She just won't leave.
Lisanne believes that her Oma, her grandmother, in death as in life, wants to hurt and terrify her. But she has a very different relationship with her Opa, or grandfather.
Opa was a much kinder, gentler person than Oma was. Opa was a very proud man. He was a very proper man. He never went anywhere without a hat on, and he always made sure he was shaved. And he was also a master cabinet maker. He liked to play practical jokes, and his big thing was everything had to be straight. If he could have carried a level in his back pocket, he would have. I have a 13-foot dresser. I have a coffee table. I have an entertainment center, and I have a couple other things that he made as well. He only wanted the best for me. When Oma and I would start arguing, he would break in and tell Oma to shut up and to leave me alone. When my grandfather passed away, I was very upset. I'm bawling my eyes out because this is the first death I've had that has been close to me. At about 2 o'clock in the morning, my entire room filled up with light. And I woke up and I looked, and Opa was standing at the end of the bed. He looked at me and he smiled and said, I'm here to say goodbye. And he kind of shriveled down into this ball of light and went out the window. I know that Opa still visits my house. I know he's looking around and out for me. I get a feeling of peace when I know Opa's around. I see his reflection in the TV, and I see his reflection in my computer monitor. And when I see him in the reflection, he's always smiling. My mother made these bears. She used to make these for other people as well. They're called memory bears. When Opa had died, Mom made me this bear. This is made out of a spring jacket. The vest and the pants are made out of his suits, one of his suits, and his sweater and turtleneck is made out of a sock. And then when Oma had passed away, Mom said, well, do you want something to stick on that black bear to make it an Oma bear? And I thought, well, I guess, you know, I've got the Opa bear, I may as well have an Oma bear. So I took her necklace. I do believe Opa is in some way keeping Oma away. I have enough of Opa in my house. I have photos of Opa. I have the furniture. When you walk in my house, the first thing that you see is the wedding picture of my Oma and my Opa. So I have him in my house. Unfortunately, she's there, but I have Opa there.
In both Lisanne and Helen's stories, ghosts superimpose their faces over the face of someone else. This type of ghostly possession is a common theme in supernatural literature. Our experts notice a deeper parallel in the two stories. They tell us that it is attachment to something or someone that keeps ghosts among the living. Helen believes the ghost of the old lady was attached to the house she lived in during her life, and so she returned to drive out the woman she saw as an interloper. Lee San believes her Oma was attached to the anger and hatred she had towards her daughter and granddaughter. She returned after death to torment them. Fortunately, Lee San has her Opa to keep her Oma at bay and to bring some joy to her memories of her grandparents.
I think that if he were alive today, he would be happy, I believe, with the person that I've turned out to be. A strong person who will no longer let anyone treat me the way she did.
I think there are probably connections that people have that you either get trapped and you can't move on. And I think philosophically, as I hear so many other stories around, I really think that there's either that dimension where people just can't leave or don't, they have their imprint. They make it known.